towers and blow buildings up. That's not the quote unquote kind of terrorism Iran engages in, right? So
I have one question, Cyrus. Do you think that the attacks on Emirates or other Gulf countries will continue, or you think it will also stop? Because there's this talks that the agreement will include like a general ceasefire, including in Lebanon, but it doesn't mean, I think, that necessarily attacks will stop. What do you think?
Yeah, so for the GCC, certainly it will stop. And before this war, Iran had actually very constructive relationships, especially with the UAE. So on paper, they stand opposed. But in the 70s, the first wave of the business class that came in with Iran were Iranian, through the 80s. And then later they became Brits. And then now it's the Indians and Chinese. So Iran actually has deep roots in the UAE. I don't think there's any impasse or any bad blood that can't be there can't be rapprochement. Certainly there's been damage. The GCC will restabilize as long as the U.S. leads that effort and there's a unified voice, because the GCC follows essentially the United States. With respect to Lebanon, it will be a very fragile ceasefire. I don't even think it will last a day. I think Israel will throw everything in the kitchen sink to derail these peace talks or negotiations and torpedo it. So to that end, I don't think the Lebanese situation will be resolved easily. Even if a grand deal is reached, right, which I'm very skeptical of, I give it about a 70-30. This offer has been taken, I give it about 30 days with provisions to extend, right, to 60 days. I think we're looking at least 3 months to 6 months of
that is only the beginning.
The holdup will be the 460
just the first step.
60% highly enriched uranium.
Even there, if you look deep down,
give that to the United States.
It is not really
it will have to
an
go through
attraction
Russia.
in man and
these
woman.
were already discussed
It is
in
attraction
Switzerland
between
9-10 months ago,
masculine energy and feminine energy.
So
it is not an attraction between A and B.
And hash out things that have already been discussed
Far
for years.
deeper mysteries are involved, even in ordinary love affairs.
3.6% maximum enrichment and probably 5 years zero enrichment.
Nobody
I think
can
the United States was
define
pushing
love.
for 20. Iran won't agree to that. There are some
Thousands
very
of
hard
definitions
lines
have been
that
tried,
Iran has,
all have failed.
and the United States
Love
as well.
remains
So I wouldn't call it
indefinable,
maximalist position.
very
The
elusive,
rhetoric we've heard in the last
very
weeks, both sides
mercurial.
were maximalist, but
The
I
more
think
you
when it
want
put
to
push
bless
came to shove,
profit,
both sides have shown enough flexibility to take this off ramp. But now the real negotiations begin, right? So assuming this MOU will actually see the light of day and have ink dry on it, so the real negotiations will be the real test. How flexible is Trump? And you could rest assured he's getting major pressure from both Netanyahu and the entire
farther
lineup of
away it
AIPAC
goes.
to make
You
sure
cannot
that there
catch
is no
hold
deal
of it.
reached. So that's why I'm very skeptical, cautiously, I have a little bit of optimism, but I don't give it more than a 30%
To know
chance that
what
we'll see a deal reached.
exactly it is, you cannot
Can I respond to that real
control
quick?
it.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Love
I said this at the
remains
top of the space, but it's been
unknowable.
a while and there's a lot of new people here.
Man
It
wants
is the
to know,
summer
because
of
knowledge
election
gives
year
power.
in the United States, in which
You would
Trump
like
is
to be
highly likely
powerful
to lose
over
the U.S.
love,
House of
but that
Representatives
is impossible.
and possibly the Senate.
Love
There
is
is
far
no
bigger than
chance,
you.
zero,
You
that
cannot
30 days
possess
from now,
it. You
when
can
we're less
only
than 6
be
months out from
possessed
the
by
election,
it.
Trump is going to restart the war.
Hence,
No chance. Mark my words. And here's
Those
the other thing
people
you should
who
mark my
want
words
to
about.
possess
You
love
heard it here first. The next distraction
never
is going
come
to be
to know
Cuba.
anything
We're going to
of
claim
it.
victory. He's going to throw a big party, and then he's going to go after Cuba.
Only those who are
likes to take fights
courageous
that he
enough.
knows he can win, and he thought that was going to be the case in Iran.
Only
He's
those who
tragically
are
miscalculated. The last thing,
gamblers
I agree with Cyrus
who
on
can
this.
risk their very
This is
life
going to put a huge
and be
strain
possessed
on
by
the
some
United
unknown
States' relationship
energy
with Israel and
are
Trump's
able to
personal
know what
relationship
love
with
is.
Bibi Netanyahu. Remember, Trump issued an original order threatening military action against Israel if they struck terrorists in
Two different
Kuwait.
paths,
And
one
sorry,
shared
not
dream,
Kuwait,
and a showdown
in
that
Qatar.
defines the new era of attack.
So imagine what will happen if Trump thinks that Netanyahu's on the wrong side of this. I suspect we will probably allow Israel to do what it needs to do in Lebanon, but not while the peace talks are going on. And if they do, they're going to be pissing off the president, and they'll just have to take that risk.
It's a great question, because I was thinking about my origin story and where I truly come from. And I was manufactured by Uncle Sam.
He was also claiming
During the forests of Georgia, where we had to drink the blood of our enemies, as we learned how to prepare to conquer an Islamic State.
But she is close to the White House, and she does oftentimes get Trump's thinking right.
And you think what you're saying
Military operation that's the full invasion of a country that wants to fight you is going to be easy in the sense that there would be U.S. casualties. I don't think that's what he wants to do. I think, again, he wants the Venezuela deal. We just announced the indictment of Raul Castro, the former dictator of Cuba. I suspect that indictment has been in place for decades, and it's just been sealed, and we just released the fact of it. But he is clearly, in my view, going to try to do the Venezuela solution. He's going to coerce the current leader to make a bunch of promises and share oil and oil revenue with us, which is all this was ever about, and he's going to call it a victory. If we actually have to go in, we'll succeed, but there'll be casualties and hundreds of billions of dollars spent for nothing. But not for nothing, but for something that's not worth it.
Vladimir, if I may, I had a couple points on the Lebanon piece. I think that will be if a deal is reached, ultimately I think it is to the benefit of Lebanon, obviously, for there to be a unification of the Hezbollah into integration into the larger army. That will not take place until there's very credible security assurances led by the United States, right? So the U.S. has to stand up to Israeli pressure not to give them a free pass to act, overtly aggressive, right? The Israelis are very heavy-handed. Proportionality is not in their playbook, right? So that's at least the United States doesn't fight like that. So America needs to take the lead and provide those assurances, and I think that's a three-year runway for that to happen. So I think that'll be a sticking point if a deal is reached. So that will keep the deal on the rocks until there's stability in northern Israel and southern Lebanon, until that is completely quelled, where the Israelis can live in peace without fear of getting rocketed, and the Lebanese not getting their homes carpet bombed, right? So it is a very terrible situation for the civilians on both sides, right? So that needs to resolve anyway. But I feel like Israel's war machine is churning so hard that they just don't want to shut it off. They've been on a go, since Syria before the fall of Assad. They've been on a mission, and I think this war with Iran has demonstrated the limitations of even the most exquisite military, right? So there are limitations to force, especially when you have a chokehold like the Strait of Hormuz that will have global implications. So I don't think there's any going back to war. If there was to be a casus belli, it was during Project Freedom, right, where Trump came in and said the threshold hasn't been met for the ceasefire to be broken, where it clearly was. Iran fired several salvos of cruise missiles at destroyers. I mean, that is a very flagrant act. And also for the U.S. to probe and test the Strait. Both sides were bellicose, but when it came to it, neither side took that opportunity to escalate to full-scale warfare. Short of a massive land invasion with 800,000 plus troops, with no guarantee, right, of regime change. The only thing you can guarantee is a failed state, right? So if the agenda is to make every country a failed state in the Middle East, this is a good playbook. We did it to Libya, we've done it to Syria, to Iraq, right? It hasn't paid any dividends, nothing of substance. So I think it's time for the deep state, if you want to call them, or because this is not a Trump issue. This kind of liberal, hegemonic, Middle Eastern policy that we're going to bring democracy, and democratic countries don't fight each other. We've been going with that notion, and it hasn't been working. I think the U.S. needs to pivot to a more realist-based foreign policy and worldview. Similar to China and Russia. How they're conducting themselves. I think we've squandered great wealth since 2001. And at a cost of many lives, and it's time to pivot away from that. And if we can make amends with Vietnam, America killed 2 million Vietnamese, and we lost over 50,000 soldiers on our side, and now we're doing advanced weapons deals with Vietnam, and over $100 billion in trade. So approach Iran is possible. The Iranians, yes, it's an Islamic republic, but so is many other countries. Them being a Islamic regime.
Which funds terrorism at the international level. So it's not like any other country. Can we stop this propaganda?
Yeah, it's not propaganda, but the thing is this, right? When we look at, but let me explain. I'll respond to it. If that was the case, right? Operation Timber Sycamore would have never happened, right? If both Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey worked together to fund al-Nusra, and now we've put a real terrorist, right? The Salafi Wahhabi terrorists. They're the ones that cut off heads. They're the ones that join Al-Qaeda and fly planes into buildings, right? Iran funds Hezbollah. Let me explain. Please don't. Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point, then you can respond. But let me finish my point. You can respond. Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. I don't know why you're cutting me off. Then you can finish. You can say whatever you want. Let me finish my point.
No, but you've been talking for 25, 30 minutes.
Give me 30 seconds, and you can say
I
it.
think it's enough.
You're cutting me off. So if we're to stand on that, then no terrorism, we need to have a distinct definition of the types of terrorism, right?
Well,
Iran. So you're right. But like.
Kitover, because you are based in Europe, let's say. I think you can hear us. Waja, can you, what's your thoughts? I think you wanted to say something also.
Thank you. And I think the earlier there is one somebody saying what's it called, praising Iran. I don't think so. What is the message coming from the Iran? Iran is killing Baluch. It's not terrorist. It's not terrorism. Iran is killing the Kurds. It's not terrorism, and Iran is also killing the Farsi females. Those don't wear a hijab and also live their life however they want it. It's not terrorism. What else evidence you need or proof you need to prove that the Iran regime that it's not a terrorism? One thing remember, after this thing, if US and Israel give the free pass to Iran, Iran will literally genocide all those Farsis, all those Kurds, all those Baluch. They stand for something. And today, this election, it's not a political decision. It is an election decision. It's coming from the United States, and it's going to change. It not. This is the fire. Is still it has a small fire is still somewhere. The Baluch and the Kurd, and also you did use that today. How many Kurd got hit by the Iran? It's not. It will never stop. It might stop for the other, like maybe UAE don't get hit, maybe the Qatar will not get hit, but Baluch will be genocide same way it was today, it was yesterday, it's gonna be tomorrow. And same for the Kurds, same for the Baluch. And also somebody says that, oh, the Iraq, they play this role, play this role. Iraq, literally, Obama regime, they give you a full control of Iraq. And still you think still you try to because those females, those Baluch, those Kurd, they had a hope. I don't think so. That hope gonna die soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Now you want to go to Piotr. He has been waiting. Piotr, go ahead.
Thanks, Vladimir. Look, I just came off an in-depth analysis with Tutor Posse, and we were on another stream when this broke. This is a fundamentally bad day for the US, or the Trump administration especially. It is a strategical blunder of the highest order. And no amount of MAGA supporters, Trump supporters trying to claim that it is anything but a mess. It is a mess, and it's more than a mess. It's a disaster in many ways. Now, of course, the Iranians are not exactly in an ideal position. Their economy is shot, but they have something that the US doesn't, which is leverage, and they have a largely unified front. The Islamic Republic functions still, and the whole goal of this war, regardless of what the Trump administration say about it being about the military or the nuclear abilities or the navy, it was about fundamentally trying to make the Iranian regime change, be that the whole regime or a leadership change or a behavioural change. That hasn't happened. You have the son of the guy they took out, who's more hardened, more intent to be resilient against the United States. You have the IRGC, which is more decentralized and flexible, adaptable. You have military stockpiles and protectable capabilities and whatever, more underground. So we have less idea of where they are and how they're operating or how they're functioning. You have a Strait, one of them critical economic corridors, largely completely controlled by the side that frankly was quite content with letting it be a free passage of water before. And you have, I think, the most critical thing that Trita and I agreed on, which is that this is a huge balance of power shift, not between the Iranians and Israelis or something like that, but between the Chinese and Americans. Because as the Chinese have been involved in peace talks, they have been helping the Pakistanis, they have been adding political weight, and whilst they may not have their fingertips on the official documents, they have certainly been behind the scenes. And so over the years, as the Chinese have increasingly challenged the economic dominance of the Americans in the Middle East, they are now challenging their diplomatic ability as well, and demonstrating fully, very clearly, that you do not necessarily need military power or hard power to get things done. The Chinese have a growing military. I'm not going to pretend that they have the same level as the US in other ways, but clearly they're able to persuade other countries to do things without having to invade or airstrike, etc., etc. So I think that this is just the beginning, right? This is the end of the military side, we hope, but it's just the beginning of the diplomatic and political implications. And those are going to last for a long time. And I think it largely also depends on what happens in the Israeli election in the midterms. Trump is not out of the woods, no matter what he claims. And I think that this is, as I say, I think it's a strategical humiliation for the US in many ways. It's not to say the Iranians don't have challenges, but they are working and have been for a long time, I think, in the past few months, at the day after tomorrow. And what I mean by that is simply that they have been talking to the Omanis, talking to the Saudis, talking to other Gulf states about how to administer the strait, how to coexist, even if they don't fully recognize each other or whatever, in the case of Saudi Arabia and Iran or something. But whilst the American government have been just focusing on day-to-day and whatever, the Iranians have been a lot more long-termist and have demonstrated that strategic depth, which Trump just doesn't have. And I think the Iranians are going to come out of this, they will get economic concessions, they will get economic relief, and that's going to be one of the biggest critical things to allow them to improve the country internally, whilst reinforcing their control. And I'll land it simply by saying that this was all about the liberation of the Iranian people. Let's not forget what this is all about. The people in Iran been on the receiving end of this war for the past 3 months, and they're just going to be on the receiving end of an even more tightened regime with more desires to ensure control and their survival, and nothing else changes. So, glad to see the MOU, but worry about the next day and what it means for the Iranian people and the state of the country. But of course also the balance of power across the Middle East and broader globe. But thanks. I'll see you soon.
So do you see this as a victory for Iran or for the US, or you think that's too simplistic?
Say again?
Do you think this as a victory for Iran or for the United States, or is that too simplistic?
Well, of course it's too simplistic, Vladimir. You know me. Nothing's black or white in international relations, and those who try to claim it is are either disingenuous or don't actually know what international relations and geopolitics is about. This is a relative win for the Iranians, right? It's relative, not absolute. It's a relative win because they have largely come out of this intact. The government exists. The economy is on its last legs, but it's still there. They control the Strait of Hormuz, and that is their single biggest asset, right? Not anymore. If you'd asked the IGC a few years ago what was their nuclear option, they would emphasize the need to have a nuclear weapon as their biggest deterrent. All this has done, this war, I think fundamentally, is woken them up to actually their biggest asset is the Strait of Hormuz, its geography. They are able to control a body of water in a way that no one else can. And if they ever feel that the American government, Trump, whoever, wants to try to force their hand again, then they can just put this pressure point again, put their thumb on this pressure point. And I think that's a huge strategic revelation for them. As I say, the US this is a huge defeat for the US. I mean, has the US military been defeated? No, but in the sense of like the US has not achieved its military objectives. They have not achieved what they intended to do, and therefore, if you want to be very simple, yeah, Iran win, the US lose.
Thank you. Thank you, Piotr. Also, Drew had his hand up. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, hi. I'm not a geopolitical expert at all, but I think that just to put a counterpoint to what a lot of people are saying, I think that this is not at all a disaster for the U.S. I think that we come out stronger net. I think that it makes let's see, just things that I pulled out of the top of my head. China's oil production was especially disrupted. Their oil buying was especially disrupted. The UAE pulled out of OPEC. Our natural gas facilities and oil production arguably strengthened, even if it's just in the short term. Europe's even more locked into the U.S. oil orbit. Kuwait was on the verge of needing to engage in swaps with the U.S., treasury swaps. I think that strengthens our dollar. I just think that ultimately, this talk of the balance of power shifting is overblowing it. I think that, Iran being between the U.S. and China, I think that Iran being a stronger player in the Middle East is better for the U.S. I think that our Gulf partners, people are going to look twice into investing in them versus us. I don't really understand how, even whatever the reasons that we went into this financial engineering escapade, right? Whatever we said that we were doing, I think on the whole, in a disaster, the strong players in any system tend to come out stronger on the other side relative to the weak guys. And in this case, it's Europe is more beholden to the U.S. and the Arab states are more beholden to the U.S. And our oil production and our oil people, I guess, I don't even know, but they have a stronger relative position now. So I don't really understand how this is bad, other than inflation. But I mean, that was already happening in the last administration. So I think the inflation is mostly because of the Federal Reserve printing money over a long period of time. So that's just my point, is that I don't see how this is at all bad. I think this is like a great win for the U.S., especially if we can get out unscathed. And whatever we do with Cuba, I think ultimately Trump is a broad strokes guy. He wants, better oil production in the U.S. I think he wants things flying, capital flying back into the U.S. I think it's going to happen. And I think that, with a country like Cuba, it's right on our doorstep. The long-term logical end to our relationship with Cuba is greater relations, more trade relations. I think Trump is thinking in terms of trade relations, and he'll probably want a trade deal with Cuba at some point. But that's besides the point. I think that with Iran, we come out stronger relative to a lot of people and a lot of countries. So
thank you.
Can I
Thank you.
And that right there is a demonstration of why the US has lost so badly. If people think that.
So
100%.
Yeah, let me just reply to this very quickly, okay? So
Very quick.
Nothing that you mentioned is actually fundamentally true, right? So there are limits on what the U.S. oil capacity to export are, and it is certainly not enough to make up for any kind of oil shift, because these oils are done on contracts, right? Futures contracts. So the oil that's shipping now was bought 3 months ago, right? And we don't have the...
Yeah, but that's a short-term limit, right? I mean, more investment is going to come in.
All, Europe is changing its... Excuse me, you want to talk about long-term? Let's talk long-term, okay? Europe is changing its fundamental energy design to renewable energy. And despite what people might want to say, that renewables are actually a large portion of China's own energy consumption. So Europe is going along that way to renewables. So oil and gas is not going to be, in the future, is going to be the long-term solution to this. Yes, you will still need it, but let's be absolutely clear about one thing and one thing only, okay? I am an America First guy, okay? But let me be absolutely clear about one thing. Countries buying oil from the United States does not benefit the average American taxpayer 1 single cent. It benefits oil companies who, yes, pay taxes, but that is a proverbial drop in the bucket to the overall price fixture, right? And I just have to make sure people understand. This is not a video game. This is not a real-time simulator where you do a deal with your country and your country gets richer because your funds got added to. That's not the way it works, right? They buy oil from oil companies, and those oil companies pay taxes, sure, but that's not enough to help out the average family that's dealing with cost of living increases. That's not enough to deal with grocery prices, gas prices, small businesses, interest rates spiking to 5%, right? The yield on the bond is close to 5%. That's recessionary. The last time I was at this was around 2009, right? So this isn't La La Land where you get to play The Sims in Civilization 4. This is actual real life for people. So we can talk about the macro benefits to America and this ridiculous idea of power politics. China.
Well, that's fine, but you know, people saying, "Oh, this is terrible for America." And they're talking about macro benefits.
No, hold on. I'll tell you why this is terrible for America. Let me be absolutely clear why this is terrible for America. Okay.
Like this entire conversation is a macro issue.
No, it's not macro.
Nothing to do with the taxes.
Let me finish. Hold on. This isn't macro. This is micro, because the average American is going to be dealing with, and keep in mind, we don't actually have a deal right now. This is just floating in the breeze. Nobody actually has a piece of paper. So you don't know, and I don't know what that piece of paper says. And if anyone...
The deal doesn't matter.
No,
the deal doesn't matter once we get out.
Great conversation.
No. The only thing that matters is that we get out.
Thanks.
And, we've done the damage.
Yeah, we've done the damage.
Guys, I have to wrap up, so I just want to go to Brian, and then I want to wrap up the news, and then we'll end the space for tonight. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Vladimir. I'm going to respond to the nonsense we just heard, but my macro point I just want to leave people with are two. One, as I said at the beginning of the space, this is a catastrophic, generational failure for the United States and the West. What this war really was incoherent, but let's just say that we actually had coherent war aims. As they were stated by the President and the Secretary of State, they were, number one, dismantle Iran's nuclear program. Iran can never have nuclear weapons. Number two, destroy, triple underline that, destroy their capability to build and deploy ballistic missiles and other weapon systems. Number three, stop them from funding terrorism around the world. Those are the articulated, and sink their Navy, objectives of the war. Not by me, by the President and the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense. We have achieved exactly zero of those. What we have achieved is letting the world and the Iranian regime know that they could put a chokehold on the world whenever they want, a capacity they didn't know they had before this. They're going to get nuclear. I'm not finished. We did not get any of our objectives. We destroyed our alliances, which, mark my words, we're going to need against China, unless we capitulate to them too, which is what Trump tried to do in Beijing. I am not a MAGA person, okay? But the stated objectives of Trump and MAGA have been a dismal failure. And what you just heard from this guy are the MAGA talking points that we're going to hear in the next couple of weeks. The problem is no administration official ever articulated any of those goals. I'll leave it to Craig and other people who know about the oil business to know whether that's even accurate what this guy said. But those were never the goals of the war. Catastrophic failure. Last thing, and we just saw it on display here. Copium is not analysis, okay? We've had people like this up on the stage from the beginning. They're projecting onto the president 95D chess that not only does he not have, but he's never articulated a word of it. So this is the spin you're going to hear. It's going to be lies just like it was yesterday. Thanks.
Thank you. I have to do a hard stop now because they already asked me 10 minutes ago to stop the space. So I'm now just going to wrap up the news, and I thank all the speakers for their contributions. So what we were discussing today was that there was reportedly President Trump on Truth Social, he posted that an agreement has been largely negotiated with Iran. they're still talking about the final points. And the reported terms of the proposed agreement reportedly includes the halting of fighting of all fronts, including Lebanon, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the ending of the U.S. naval blockade, and Iran not charging tolls, and also releasing $25 billion in frozen Iranian assets and delaying the nuclear negotiations for 30 to 60 days. Iranian state media have denied that the Strait of Hormuz has been returned to normal, and they also say that Iran's nuclear program has not been discussed. And also today there was news that there was gunfire reported outside of the White House, and multiple reports say that Secret Service agents shot 2 armed suspects and 1 bystander was injured, but President Trump is safe. So keep following the Mario Naval's account on X for breaking updates and live coverage on recent events, especially on the current situation between the US and Iran. And if there's any final agreement between Iran and US, most likely we'll have another space again, but it depends on the news developments. Thank you all